Hello and welcome to another episode of Livecast Construction Experience. Delighted this week to be joined again by Shane Dempsey, Director of Communications at the Construction Industry Federation. Shane is a man wedged between construction companies on the ground and communication with government and has kindly given us time this morning to come on and try and shed some light on the current update and restrictions. I suppose what that means for companies on the ground. Shane, you're very welcome. It's great to have you back again. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.
I suppose get right into it, will we? I suppose what is the CIF reaction to the latest announcements on Tuesday evening?
It's I suppose it's a mixed reaction, predominantly disappointment, we have to say. We'd welcome, of course, any reopening of the industry. So the 25% of the industry that was shut down, i.e. housing, great to see that going again. Our contention is, though, that it should never have been shut down. So we're looking at it glass half empty in a way. So we're particularly disappointed that we've now kind of decided to extend the only lockdown of construction in the world for another indefinite period, supposedly up to May the 4th. And we've shut down our commercial non-residential sector, which, when we looked at the figures from the lockdown last year and the losses, accounted for about 81% of the 2 billion lost output in the industry last year. So we can't understand the decision. Even to initially lock down the 50% in January, you might allow for a fear-based decision, but they're definitely not using evidence, because we've been putting HSE evidence in front of NEFID and every politician that we can get our hands onto, and they are not. This is not a decision based on facts. It's based on fear, and it's not driven by data at all. It's driven by vaccine numbers and politics. So we're, I hope you can tell, we're very disappointed that they've decided to make this call.
It's an interesting, your frustration is probably echoed across the calls I've had probably since we heard the announcement and speaking to our customers. Frustration seems to be the biggest one, and fear for livelihoods is real now. I suppose some of the data you're talking about, the HSPC report there from 22nd of November up to the 20th of March, and some of the facts that have come from that, if you talk about real facts. Workplace outbreaks amount to 7% of all outbreaks of C19. Construction contributes no more than 5% of workplace outbreaks. 63% of all C19 outbreaks are related to social gatherings. Persons are less risk of C19 in the workplace, following adherence to strict protocols, which we have. Some exceptions, of course, frontline health workers. And of the specified workplaces outlined in the HSP report, construction has the lowest number of C19 cases versus any other sector, with just 145. The big question here on everyone's lips and everyone's mind is this HSBC report shows construction to have the lowest number of C19 cases versus any other sector. 145 is the number. The shutdown does not reflect what's happening in countries with the same or even worse numbers, let's just say, across the world. Why do you feel our sector's been shut down? And when the data seems to point towards a case for a full reopening, I mean, what sense can you make of this?
We can't. And it's not, there's no logic, and there's no epidemiological basis either. And God, I don't know where to start with these statistics, because they're from the HSE. They monitor at-risk industries, as they call us. So that's the meat and food processing plants and other sectors, right? So that they have been monitoring since September 2020 outbreaks on sites or factories, and an outbreak is anything over 2 cases, right? That happened on site. So there's 2,000 construction workers currently with COVID, we think. But there's only 40 cases or 44 cases associated with construction sites. So that means that 2,000 construction workers are in the community, but only 42 of them got onto sites in the last couple of months. So we've seen 145 cases out of 158,000 cases since January. Like, it's 0.09% of the cases that you see on RTE every evening, you know, are associated with construction sites. So construction sites are safe, all construction sites, right? Be it through the very strict standard operating procedure that we're all operating to, or just the nature of the outdoor kind of work. And I have to say, the discipline of the vast majority of the workforce have kept those figures low. Like, lads want to work, and they don't want to make anyone else sick, like everyone else in the community. So look, I'm pulling myself back from saying that we're the victim here of a kind of the tension between NPHET and the government, where NPHET wants zero mobility and zero COVID as close as possible, and the government need to make political decisions, you know, to open schools or to open this part of the economy, right? And we're caught in between where NPHET want to close everything they can and the government are saying no, and somewhere in between, we can't really identify, somewhere in between that the government have said, right, well, we can't let NPHET shut everything down, so we'll partially shut down construction, right? So that, I don't think I'm over exaggerating, but I think that certain individuals on NPHET or in government look out their window and see the guys in the high vis getting something in for lunch or for breakfast, and they go, construction, loads of construction workers walking around the town or the community. This is dangerous, right? So the sonar we were getting back from all the government TDs, most of whom, in fairness, wanted the industry reopened, the sonar we were getting back was mobility, mobility, mobility. And that's a code word for people moving around the economy or the community, all right? So we were trying to explain to them repeatedly that if construction workers going into Spar was an issue, or coming out of a van, you know, was the other great anecdote we kept hearing, coming out of a van at a service station on the M3, you know, if that was a major issue, then you would see more than 40 cases on sites, or you would see more than 145 people on sites that got COVID. So like, the evidential basis didn't really wash with them. So we're dealing with people who just see a high vis and go, oh, construction must be an issue, and they're just trying to keep it as shut down as possible. So that's very, very frustrating, especially, it just really lays bare the way the government have made the decisions on this. And I can't understand, I'm very frustrated, and I've been engaging with government for a long time, and I've never seen anything like this, to be honest with you, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's one area there that seems to be getting missed as well, and you know, there's a lot of, I just read out a lot of high level facts, and we do hear a lot of numbers and facts, and I think there's one area that's been slightly forgotten about. We just had a guy on the podcast there just last week, Richard from B&G Construction, who would be, I suppose, class, would be talking about the high level numbers, probably on the smaller side, and his issues are, you know, the biggest concern is, first of all, I'm not being supported. So we have overhead and zero revenue. So how do we support that? It's unsustainable, number one. And second of all, my staff, being the nature of construction workers, are not going to sit at home. They're going to go and find work. So he's going to be left. How does he operate? And I suppose one of the biggest concerns that is out there now at the level of, you know, not talking about the big tier one guys who have cash flow, is how are we going to sustain these business? How are we going to keep these business going when we continue to take the revenue away from them? I mean, do you feel there's been enough support put out to these companies?
I mean, like, it's I'd say an ongoing issue with government and the industry. That the schemes that they design do not recognize the kind of cyclical nature or the project-based nature of the construction industry. So there are a lot of companies, small companies. There's 57,000 SMEs operating in the industry, right? And they're cash flow businesses in a lot of ways, the smaller cohort. And the grants and the schemes created by and generated by government just aren't suitable for construction companies. Like, they were designed so that a small company could take on a load of debt to tide themselves over for a lockdown that they don't need. So who's making money there? Because that small SME who's getting no cash flow and will struggle in the latter half of the year with projects, etc., has to pay interests and money back to some lender because they were unnecessarily locked down. Like the support wasn't there. So I'm equally annoyed and frustrated that there hasn't been a proper concerted effort to kind of recognize, I suppose, the nature of construction and what's been foisted on these lads,
Yeah.
So,
and in fairness to the CIF, you guys have been out there, you've been lobbying hard, you've been pushing hard for the industry as a whole to be reopened, not housing, and I suppose we've heard Tom Parlin put his case forward, to say, well, construction around the world is open. There was some talk, and I think it was back through sort of early February, that if should we reach the below 1,000 cases mark, that was was that ever a reality?
No, never. It was never going to happen. It was that was back before I suppose the politicians were still trying to project the idea that they were in charge of what was happening, so to speak. Now, I think that comment came from the Taoiseach, and it wouldn't have passed muster with NEFID, in their discussions and consultation after NEFID's recommendation. So that's what's happened a few times to us. All the political system, all the politicians, right the way up, recognise that we're safe, number one, and that they need us to get the economy going and we can operate safely. So, it's the perfect storm for us to reopen or stay open. That's why they gave us essential status at level 5. But after Christmas and the political fallout of going against NEFID's recommendation, thereafter the political system would not, and I mean the senior ministers and the Taoiseach himself would not and could not politically be seen to go against NEFID. But NEFID aren't taking a risk management approach like we would in construction to an issue. They're taking a blanket try to stop as many people as possible moving around the country, which is a valid pandemic response when you don't have track and tracing, when you don't have antigen testing like that. That's the frustrating thing. We have had a year to put these kind of things in place. The industry is doing antigen testing amongst the bigger companies. 7 of them are giving us their testing data. They've done 50,000 tests since January. They've found 202 or 222 cases, right? So just the discipline that the listeners and your customers there and the guys on site must be exhibiting, and the clients, of course, is huge. Because there's 40,000 construction workers out there working at the moment, we'll say, since January, and only 145 of them have contracted COVID because of a construction site. So the amount of the guys staying at home because they're being told to stay at home, and the amount of guys who are asymptomatic on site, who aren't breaking social distancing, it's like, and we're screening workers as well, and lads going on site. So that means we're actually helping the public health system by getting these guys off site and getting them back into their homes where they isolate. So it's very frustrating. Now, the thing that gets me is the mobility argument is complete and utter in relation to construction. A complete and utter red herring, and it drives me absolutely crazy because even if 4 guys are traveling in vans, as I've said before, if it was a major issue, we'd have construction issues on site. But the guys going into Spar, right, and I'm using it as an analogy, they're in there wearing their high vis, but they're walking amongst guys in suits and people working in manufacturing where there's no safety protocols. Mm-hmm. The construction worker is likely to have been screened, he's likely to have been tested, he's undergone an induction program, the online induction, he's got a COVID compliance officer telling him, watch yourself, etc. And we're letting maybe 260,000 workers in manufacturing and food and those other sectors where there's 10 times as many outbreaks and cases. We're letting them just circulate and mobilize around the economy every day. Now we're going to allow all of Dublin. You know, you can travel anywhere in Dublin now after April the 12th, I think it is. There's mobility for you, you know. It just is, it beggars belief, Kieran. Sorry, and I'm probably harping on a bit too much.
No, I think there's absolutely no question that I think there's the frustrations that we hear are just across the board. I mean, I think this brings us up to somewhere around 75% open, 25% not open. I mean, from what I'm hearing, is there a fear that we might see some sort of rebellion against this? And what I mean by that is that I can't do it anymore. I cannot afford to let my business go, and therefore I've had enough, and I'm going back to work.
Yeah, I think that's been happening. If you were listening to media reports, you know, they're getting the calls in, you know, from neighbours, you know, from people, residents, and so on. So there's a fair amount of that activity going on. Guys put to the pin of their collar, you know, who are kind of forced into that situation. So I think that's probably going to happen. It wouldn't be a soft and silent rebellion. I think people just slipping back into work and doing a bit, and that's the danger with these, with, you know, measures. And they acknowledge that themselves in terms of the social gatherings and so on. They've been, so you hear the message, we have to let, you know, give people some sort of hope, and the realization is people are traveling more than 5k and have been for months. The traffic on the canal, where I sometimes occasionally have to go into the office, is as busy as it ever is, you know, and so I think that will be happening from now on, I think. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I suppose that the plan looks like May the 4th. I'm hearing that, you know, we might get a decision. I suppose what will be the plan for the CIF between now and then? Will it be just leave it enough alone, or will we trying to push to get that other 20-25% open?
No, I don't think that the 25% of the membership that are still affected by this will be advising us to sit back and sure we'll wait, because it's actually May the 4th is the next time they'll consider reopening. Mm-hmm. So like for the types of projects they're talking about, the clients they're talking about, like I just think about what does an international investor or an FDI kind of client, like how do you explain what's going on to them? How does a country manager of a major, you know, we all know kind of technology company or pharmaceutical company go back to their HQ in the US or wherever it is and say, oh, sorry, we can't start that block of apartment or offices there. We can't start that building because the government have locked down. I can't see how they'll do that. So our reputation is going to take a very significant hit on this. And look, I have to keep repeating it. All the misery, all the stuff we're talking about here, all the companies that will go under, completely unnecessary because we can operate safely, you know, and the evidence is there. So there'll never be a tribunal on this part of the pandemic, but because it'll be focused on nursing homes, etc., etc. But you know, there's definitely been an own goal scored here. So look, we'll be I'm regressing back into that again, but basically we'll be keeping the foot down as hard as possible to have the other 25% reopened tomorrow, and then if not tomorrow, the day after, because like it's just unacceptable the way this decisions have been made, and it will see jobs and companies go to the wall, you know.
There's no doubt. I mean, I touched on some of the frustrations that I'm hearing on my side. I mean, what from your members, what is the reaction? I mean, what are you hearing from?
Well, like I suppose, as you'd expect, you know, the guys who are now able to work are delighted, fairly disgruntled that they were prevented from working, you know, for the last few weeks unnecessarily. The housing sector in particular, they'll be going gangbusters now, and I think they'll be much more assertive in saying to government, right, you've held us back from building houses, you now need to get the bloody roadblocks out of the way. So sort the planning system out, sort Irish Water out, align the state's apparatus, to house building, and, let's get on with it, they'd be that kind of way inclined, as everyone in the industry is. But like we have been kind of, that sector in particular, have felt that they've been blamed for the lack of output. But sure, they'd build as many houses as they could if the mortgages were there, if the finance was there, and if the state apparatus wasn't adding cost and delays to what they're doing. So that stream of work will continue. Excuse me. The other side of the house, the non-residential, we're livid, for the last few weeks. That's only going to be compounded now. I don't know what their individual reactions will be, but there's such disappointment there. Can you imagine this morning, you're the only part of the construction industry, in the only industry in the world that's been locked down, and they're extending it out, and you probably have the most robust safety measures of the industry, we'll say. It just beggars belief. There's huge disappointment, So we'll just have to keep at it with the TDs. I mean, we've written to every TD every week with the evolution of those statistics we've talked about. We update them every week. We express the frustration. We express the impact of the decision politically. We don't put a toot in it, but so far they've been immune. Where we are looking at now, I suppose, is can we get a kind of a national conversation going about antigen testing? If the government want to feel more comfortable, the antigen testing in construction will show minimal, but it may give comfort to the policymakers and to NEFID. So we're going to be concentrating our firepower, so to speak, on NEFID and antigen testing. And like yesterday in the Times, we saw that they've had a report about antigen testing as a way of managing risk, not as a way of curing or solving the pandemic, because it's not. Essentially, the HSE and NEFID don't rate antigen testing as a valid kind of pandemic tool. Every other country in the world does. But they've had a report for a month now saying antigen testing is a potential risk management tool. If they put in antigen and nothing has happened on it, and we don't know whether anything's going to happen on it. So we've one part of government telling us don't do antigen testing, and the other part are telling us probably a good idea. We're doing it in food. We're paying for it in food. In the UK, they're giving everyone antigen tests free so that the economy can keep operating. So we're going to be pushing that kind of concept as a way of, I suppose, making the public and the policymakers feel more comfortable that we can operate safely. I'd hold up my hand and say it's an unnecessary cost in terms of actual evidence, but longer term, when all the people start moving around their county again, and they go, actually, sure, I'll go as far as Meath, or I go as far as Kildare, and all that kind of breaks down, over the summer because people just can't handle it anymore. There may be more spikes, and it probably would be sage or salient to have antigen testing in place for the industry. But like we're asking why should our small members who are at risk of going under, pay for that antigen testing when you're paying for it in another sector, and the UK government are giving it for free. It's just been an utterly dispiriting performance for the last couple of months.
Yeah, there's cautious, and then there's risking a sector. I mean, it's a hard sector to get the wheels turning on, and I suppose if we start to lose businesses and start to lose our labour force as well, it's going to be really difficult to get them wheels turning again. Shane, we do appreciate your time. We know you're being absolutely flat out at the moment, so we appreciate any time you can give us just to get that message out there. And on behalf of, I suppose, of our listener base, we do appreciate, and most people I talk to do appreciate what the CIF are doing, because people's livelihoods are at stake. Let's put it that way. So we do appreciate it. Other than sort of what's going on at the moment, is there anything else going on inside the CIF that's coming up that's worth sharing?
Yeah, I suppose the usual kind of list of campaigns and events are ongoing. So look, I suppose what I'd say to the guys listening is we've webinars going, nearly every week. Most of them are free to anyone in the industry. Pop in, because we'll be talking about if you're not currently working, what you can do to prepare to go back on site. We'll be talking about adjudication. We'll have events on, because there's inevitably going to be a fair amount of legal wrangling after this. We'll have a webinar with revenue soon about getting yourself tax compliant again as you come back online. Brexit will rear its head again in a webinar. We'll have our digital construction conference in June. And so we've tried to maintain, the level of service virtually like everyone else in the last while. So look, log on and get in touch and see what's there. But there's lots of info and support for you there. So we'd love to have you on board and have you attend and listen again. Kieran, thanks for your time. It's important, the service you're providing, getting what we're doing out to members, etc., and the wider industry. So thanks for having us.
Appreciate that. Shane, thanks very much.